What's up, y'all? I have got another video which I found pretty interesting, covering the Johnny Depp versus Amber Heard defamation trial. Johnny Depp is suing Amber Heard because he's claiming she lied about him abusing her in an op-ed that she got posted in a newspaper, and he lost a lot of money and roles due to it. So it's been ongoing, but this was like a super interesting part of the case. They already interviewed Johnny Depp's, like, one of the psychologists they went to. But this lady, after they broke up, at some point, I think either after the op-ed or maybe a little bit before the op-ed, Amber Heard talked to this lady. And so she's been giving an expert witness, and this is the very beginning of the cross-examination from Johnny Depp's lawyers. And she said a lot of, like, very interesting things during her cross-examination that I felt like threw up quite a few red flags. And it's pretty interesting to watch him grill her on it and kind of call her on the things she was doing that maybe weren't so great.
All right, thank you. Good morning. Good morning. All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Dr. Hughes. I'm Wayne Dennis, and we haven't met.
No, good morning.
Good morning. You testified yesterday that you have to give careful attention to gendered stereotypes.
That is correct.
When you're talking about intimate partner violence, you have to pay attention to gendered stereotypes. And during your testimony, you in fact paid attention to gendered stereotypes, correct?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, you said we were going to have to pay attention to gendered stereotypes, and then you testified at length where you referenced both men and women. You paid attention to those stereotypes during the course of your testimony, correct?
What I was saying was you have to pay attention to gendered stereotypes when you're conducting these evaluations. You can't assume all the time that the male is the perpetrator and the female is the victim. You have to go into the evaluation understanding that the male also could be the victim of intimate partner violence.
In fact, you're aware that there are large-scale studies that do say that IPV towards males does exist.
Of course.
Okay. And every time you referred to the characteristic of a victim of intimate partner violence yesterday, you used the pronouns she or her, didn't you?
I was using the she and her pronouns in this case because my determination was, as I stated, that Ms. Heard was the victim of intimate partner violence. That is why I was using the she, her pronoun.
You, in fact, said women gets into the relationship for all the right reasons. That's what you said. The woman gets into the relationship for all the right reasons. And then you say difficult for victim to extricate herself. Go on to say that she can and she should. Over and over, you use she, right?
I believe in this case
Yeah, so it was pretty interesting, and maybe I should have found the clip before this when she did it, but I mean, it's like an hour and a half long of her, getting cross-examined by, the lawyers for Amber Heard talking to her and, like, letting her give her testimony. And the entire time, for an hour and however many minutes it was, she never once said, she never kept it neutral in her speech. So whenever she was talking about the victim, she would say her. And whenever she was talking about the abuser, she would say he. And it was really interesting because it was like, I felt like she was basically kind of insinuating by the way she used her language that, Johnny Depp was the abuser and Amber Heard was the victim. because she never once doesn't use those terms. And so the lawyers right now are kind of calling her on that, which I think they should have done, because even if it's not a direct like indictment where she's like just saying he's an abuser, she is subconsciously, telling the jurors that are listening to her, she's the victim, he's the abuser, she's the victim, he's the abuser. So it's pretty interesting to see that kind of flipped back and say, if you're giving a professional testimony where you're supposed to be like unbiased, non-prejudiced or whatever, it seems like you would want to use like neutral gender words, right? So that you're not influencing the jurors one way or another. So instead of saying she or he, you would say, the victim or the perpetrator or the abuser. And that way you're not kind of like planting that seed in their mind. But I think she intentionally did it that way. And so he's kind of trying to call her on it. And she's trying to make up this BS excuse, which we're going to hear now.
I did, because I was referencing this case where I found Miss Heard to be the victim of intimate partner violence. It doesn't mean that men don't get into the relationships for all the right reasons too. I believe they do.
But she never said any of that until they brought it up. So for the first hour and a half of these, the jurors hearing her, she is specifically just basically saying that Johnny Depp was an abuser and Amber Heard was the victim, and this is how she handled it, etc. And it's going to get even more juicy. I watched this live.
Nearly every time you reference the perpetrator of IPV, you used he or him, didn't you?
And it goes back to the same reasoning as I'm describing my understanding and my evaluation in this matter. Of course, men can be perpetrators and victims of intimate partner violence. That's well established in the research, and that's well established in my clinical practice as well.
Isn't the reason that you used the pronouns that you did that you almost always testify on behalf of a woman?
That's not correct.
You don't even remember the last time you testified on behalf of a man.
Well, I don't.
Ooh. He gets straight to the point. He says, you are biased, you are prejudiced, and your track record shows us as such. And you purposely and willfully use the language you did to try and incriminate him by saying he whenever you're talking about the abuser and she whenever you're talking about the victim, so that in the minds of the juror you're thinking, well, he's an abuser and she's the victim. And now come to find out she has never testified for a man. She's only done it for women.
I don't testify on behalf of someone. I testify as to the results of my evaluation. I frequently treat and assess male victims of childhood sexual abuse who are coming into treatment for
and notice it'll be, she says she frequently does it for child. So no grown men, just children, just young adults and children, like adolescents. So it's pretty interesting to say that, she's never once represented, for somebody so adamantly against like abuse to basically say that she's never once run into a client that was a man, an older man that was abused, that had IPV.
Abused by their Boy Scout leader, by their coach, by
again, abused by a man. You see what she's doing?
Their teacher, by a trusted adult. I see them in therapy. I see them in forensic matters, in criminal cases. So
So
I
I
treat
didn't ask
and
you about
evaluate
treatment.
men
I-
all the time.
I didn't ask you about treatment. I asked you about testimony. You broke out your practice between treatment and testimony. I'm not asking about treatment. When's the last time you testified on behalf of a man?
I testified recently in a deposition on behalf of a man who was traumatized because he was wrongly convicted.
At the time of your deposition 6 weeks ago, you couldn't remember a single time you had testified on behalf of a man.
I testified in my deposition that I testified in a case of a man who was wrongly convicted about 20 years and suffered physical and sexual violence in prison, and I detailed the traumatic effects of that happened on that gentleman.
All right, why don't we take a look at your deposition?
Yeah, so she's been doing this for God knows, I can't remember, it's like 30 something years. But she did just recently, one time. But the reason she's saying it that way, right, is because when they asked her all these questions and she went through deposition, she couldn't remember. And he's gonna read off that right now. And the main point that they're trying to make right now, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but the main point they're trying to make is that
Yes.
she has a bias towards women. And so she is going to say things that help Amber Heard, even if they're not true. Because
All right.
how would she know if they're true?
Transcript of the deposition that you gave March 28th, 2022, correct?
Yes.
Like she's
Let's
just
go
a
to-
psychologist. She has no evidence of the truth or validity of any of the statements that Amber Heard's made. All she has is that she told her these things. And what's even more interesting, which I think they're going to harp on in a little bit, is the fact that not only that, but she has never once, you know, done anything, talked to Johnny Depp, done anything as a couple. Yeah, she hasn't evaluated Johnny Depp at all. She has not heard anything that he has to say. All she has heard is from Amber Heard. After Amber Heard already alleged abuse, and once she was getting sued, is when Amber Heard actually, you know, retained this lady. So it wasn't like this was her doctor through their entire relationship or something. It's somebody that after the fact is now supposedly like this expert witness, you know, saying that Johnny Depp is just this abuser and Amber Heard just this pure innocent, you know, hurt child, yeah, woman, not child, but woman that just like has no, you know, she didn't do anything wrong and Johnny Depp's just an abuser.
Page 77. Let's look at page 78, line 8. So you can't recall a single instance where you were hired by the attorney representing the male in an IPV matter, correct?
In an IPV matter, not in a trauma matter or a child sexual abuse matter.
Okay, so that's the distinction. You don't have any recollection of ever testifying on behalf of a male in an IPV matter.
As I stated yesterday, the very first case that I testified in was in a same-sex intimate partner violence where...
So again, you notice it's where the male is always the abuser. It's a same sex. So yes, they were gay men, homosexual men, right? But it was two men. She's never testified in her entire career in a case where there was interpersonal violence towards a man that like a woman committed. And that just goes to show you that it's like, really, there's never been any that have gone to you. Like, what does that say about you? That like you're only taking clients and cases for women that are abused and never for men, unless it's another man that abused the man. So there's a clear bias here, which they're showing and laying out for the jury. And basically everything she said yesterday is probably going to get, thrown out in their minds.
The man was the victim of another man.
And what was interesting too is that you got to go back and watch when they interview Johnny Depp's psychologist, and she tried to be as objective as possible and not just say that Johnny Depp was just this like Mr. Sunshine and awesomeness, and there was potential that he did things that instigated or created these arguments to become more, etc. So, but there was no evidence that he was a physical abuser. He could have said things that sounded abusive, etc., but he's not hitting her and beating her up. And Amber Heard's making a claim and saying that, whether he was emotionally abusive or not, he's also physically abusive. So he's like a wife beater, which are completely two different things. Because I think emotionally, like in a relationship, there is a lot of that can happen between men and women, where people say things that they regret later that hurt the other person's feelings, demean them, etc. And it goes both ways. But the physical abuse side of it, Amber Heard is trying to claim that he beat the crap out of her all the time. So she has a psychologist that's basically agreeing with everything that Amber Heard said, and that, she's suffering all these things, but she's never once treated a man for being abused, only women or men that were abused by other men.
I routinely treat and assess same-sex couples where then the
Again, you notice how she has to say same sex.
female can be the perpetrator of another female, and the male can be the perpetrator or a victim of his partner.
So let me get this. You testified in a case where one male is alleged to have engaged in IPV against another male.
Correct.
All right. Okay. But that's the only one you remember. That's the only one you remember.
No, I've done this frequently. As you well know, most cases don't go to trial. I've worked on hundreds and hundreds of cases. You've limited to testimony. Many cases don't come to trial, but I've issued reports and worked on many cases of same-sex intimate partner violence where men are the victims.
But I did ask you about testimony.
But you notice it's so funny because she's so careful with her words, which is why I know you can tell, I feel with pretty certain confidence that she knows what she's saying. She knows why she's using the words and what she's saying the way she's saying it. And you notice she is not claiming that she has ever worked on not even done the trial work for somebody that it was a man abused by a woman. It is always a woman abused by a man, or a man abused by a man. So it shows a clear biases to where it's like, maybe she doesn't even have a bias, and she is telling 100% the truth, even though, she's never actually talked to Johnny Depp. So it's hard to trust the validity of what she's saying based off of that. And the crazy thing is that she's done hundreds of cases. So who knows how many times she's screwed people over that may or may not have been what she's saying they were. But if you heard her other testimony, I mean, she spells it out and basically makes herself sound like she's like, the first 20 minutes of her testimony is her like hooting and hollering about all the wonderful things she's done in the psychological community and all the things she serves on and all the certifications and schooling she has for this. And yeah, in this entire time of her representing all of this, she's never once represented a man, unless it was another man abusing them. So she's never, ever in her entire career represented a man that was abused by a woman. And I think all of us kind of notice that that's kind of crazy, considering there's definitely cases where that happens. Now, it may be far more infrequent, but
To testimony, and the only testimony that you remember is the same-sex couple, right?
There were multiple same-sex couples, I believe, that I testified
That you
in.
testified in court at trial.
I believe so, yes.
All right, but you didn't remember that in March.
I did remember that in March.
Okay.
she said she
You're
didn't.
a professional witness.
So she's lying right there.
That's not correct.
No, you make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year testifying in court, correct?
Not testifying in court, I conduct thorough, comprehensive psychological evaluations of individuals who are involved in a court case. The majority of those cases never show up in a courtroom.
This has to be
Half of
so
my practice
uncomfortable,
and half of
though,
my income is about my clinical
to
work
be
with
grilled
people
like
who
this
are
by
coming to me
lawyers.
for therapy.
I didn't ask you about the other half of your income. I'm asking you whether you made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year testifying as an expert witness in court.
As you're phrasing that question, that's not correct. That would be the amount of income that I generate from my forensic practice. I testify perhaps maybe once or twice a year. Most of the work is done behind the scenes in evaluating individuals and issuing reports.
But you'll agree with me that a big part of that practice is providing expert witness testimony.
That's not correct.
No? That's not a big part of your practice.
If I testify twice a year, that's not a big part of my practice. All the other time is doing the work for the cases and evaluating the individuals and issuing reports.
So he couldn't get her there, which I feel like it was kind of a reach to say that. But, you know, he's
What
trying to
percentage
discredit her
of
again.
work do you devote to forensic psychology?
As I stated yesterday, I say half and half clinical, half forensic, but I also have a substantial amount of time that I use in the professional activities and serving on professional boards.
So what portion of your practice do you provide expert witness services?
I think you're using the expert witness services synonymous with the forensic psychology part of the practice. So the forensic psychology practice, what I do here today is one part of it, and it's a smaller part as opposed to all of the evaluations and individuals that I'm assessing.
Your
Which
practice is successful enough that
in fairness to her, it doesn't sound like she does a ton of expert witnesses, but she's definitely done far more than any normal person would have. So, and she's done the prep work to do that for many people. It's just it doesn't go to a court case, you know, the majority of the time. Because people settle out of court because they don't want their business aired like this for the whole world.
you maintain your offices on Madison Avenue in New York, correctly?
Correct. I've had that office since 2005.
Right. And you're sufficiently successful at your forensic work that you're able to perform unpaid work at a hospital, correct?
Correct. And I also do pro bono work as well.
There. In fact, you actually instruct others on the use of expert testimony in court cases, correct?
On the use and understanding trauma and violence abuse in the courtroom and how to, for advocates and people who could not have this level of training or experience, how to come into the courtroom and talk about very difficult issues of domestic violence. Yes.
All right. Can we?
So now he's kind of getting to the point that, you know, she's done like whole presentations, PowerPoint presentations, etc., about how to be an expert witness. So she still does this and makes a lot of money off of it, and does the prep work and stuff. So if she did, she could go up and be an expert witness. So they're again trying to basically attack her credibility and say that she does this and makes a lot of monetary gain off of it. So how much can you really trust her opinion when she's making so much money off of it? Hundreds of thousands of dollars.
We pull up PX 1241.
and they're not going to show us what these look
You
like,
recognize that
but these are
document?
PowerPoint presentations.
Yes, it looks like the front page of a PowerPoint presentation
And it's a PowerPoint presentation given by whom?
by myself and Mary Ann Dutton, who is a very well-known and respected researcher and clinician in the area of domestic violence.
And what's the topic of the PowerPoint that you're giving?
Expert witness testimony in cases involving domestic violence.
And who did you give this presentation to?
That was to the National Clearinghouse for the Defense of Battered Women. That is an organization that provides...
See, even that for battered women. So the associations and things that she aligns herself are always in the cause of like protecting women. So she has a vested interest in taking the side of women, even if they could potentially be lying, you know, not telling the full truth, misrepresenting the truth, etc., which is the case that I think most people believe is going on with this Amber Heard case. The more you watch it, the more you are like, I don't see how people would believe that she isn't lying. Like, she literally has no evidence, no pictures to like show all these like crazy things that apparently Johnny Depp has done to her. But then Johnny Depp has plenty of pictures and eyewitness testimony, etc., of people being like, yeah, she was, you know, she hit him, she did this. So it's like pretty funny. It's pretty funny to watch them make this lady squirm.
legal services to women who have assaulted or killed their partners.
And, you know, if you haven't watched the other testimony with her and the other side of it, like, dude, it's like she just like basically like 100% takes Amber's side and is just like, you know, everything that Amber has done is because Johnny Depp abused her and beat the crap out of her, even though she has no evidence, no proof besides what this girl, after she's getting sued, said about it. Which, it's like, well, yeah, no crap. If she's going to get sued, she's going to say all these things. She never said how, she never made any of these outrageous claims to the extent that she is now to any psychologist or person that she talked to that she's willing to present the medical details to, until now with this lady that she talked to 2 years after they've been out of a relationship, after he sues her,
in self-defense,
which I think they cover
and
at some point in
mostly
this too.
people who, these individuals, the women who they've seen in treatment are
So it's like
shelter-based
there's
programs with
clearly a
advocates,
bias,
and those are
clearly a
individuals who don't
prejudice.
really know how to come into the courtroom and talk, and that's what this presentation and training was for.
I'm going to move PX 1241 into evidence.
Any objection? All right, 1241 in evidence. You want it published or?
Yes, let's publish it to the jury. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Why don't we pull up PX 1242? You recognize this document?
Yes, this also looks like a PowerPoint presentation that I gave.
All right. And what is the name of this PowerPoint presentation?
This is called The Use of Psychological Experts in Cases of Domestic Violence. It was presented to the Kings County Bar Association, which is in Brooklyn. And what this presentation talked about was some of the things that I talked to you all about yesterday, the myths and misconceptions in intimate partner violence, when women use force, what happens if they drop protective orders, how they present in court. And that's what this presentation was to attorneys at the Bar Association.
Okay. But this is another presentation that you gave as to the use of psychological experts, and you gave it to a bar association.
Right. They were prosecutors and defense attorneys in attendance at that bar association.
Yep. And all of this is just to go to show that she's making money off of being an expert witness. And I think anytime you're making money, significant portions of money, to you know, there is always going to be a conflict of interest. So, she obviously does this a decent amount. She's proud of the fact that she does all these expert witness testimonies. I think supposedly she's done like 50 or more. But I don't think we have to watch any more. If you want to watch more, I'm going to provide the link in there. He keeps grilling her. And in my opinion, he kind of just like completely destroys her credibility as far as the fact that she literally never represents any men. So she has a clear bias towards men. You know, unless it's like a something where it's a man on man violence, then she'll represent them. But and I just find it hard to believe that in such a long, illustrious career like she made out the other day, that she just somehow, oh yeah, I just magically, you know, I've just never run into that in my entire career. It's like, you know, she doesn't even try and help men out. And I do think, I'm sure there are men, well, maybe they don't seek her out because they know that she's not going to help them. But I think it's a joke to try and make the claim that, you know, women don't abuse men, and the fact that she's never handled a case, even the evaluation of a case where the woman was abusing the man, is just kind of crazy to me. But I do think, you know, that in general, men probably who do get abused aren't going to come forward. They are not going to go to psychological help and admit to getting beat by their wife. And I think a lot of it goes to like ego and the fact that you're supposed to be a man and like strong and all this stuff. So to like let your wife abuse you is probably not something they want to admit to, but I'm sure it happens more than you think it does. And women definitely are more than happy to hit men, even though, you know, acts of violence are not supposed to happen between, you know, men and women. Societally, that's how we view it. So it's like, if guys aren't supposed to be hitting women, women should definitely not be hitting guys. And I definitely think that, you know, statistically, way more men have gotten caught and probably do hit women, especially when they get mad, etc., which is not okay. But, you know, to make the claim she made and then to act like it's just always men and there's no chance, basically, that it could ever not be a woman that does this is just crazy. And I mean, they grilled her for a good amount of time. It's pretty fun to watch, but I would recommend watching the first part too, although it's kind of hard to walk through it because you can kind of see that the entire time she's basically just like trying to convince the jury that she's extremely intelligent and, you know, blah blah blah, and women get abused, and men are the abusers, and men are the abusers. And it's like an hour and 30 minutes of that, which, you know, I do think there are plenty of men that abuse people, but I also think that in this situation, it does not seem indicative of the evidence that has been shown that he is beating her up and all this stuff. So it does seem that Amber Heard is in some way, shape, or form lying. And once she gets on the stand, we'll see even more of that. But yeah, I don't want to watch it again. It just makes me mad. It just makes me mad watching her. And you see that guilty look on her face, like a little downturned mouth, the staring away into the distance. You know, she knows she got caught, bro. She knows she got caught, and this was not a good idea to come on and be the expert witness of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard's trial. I wouldn't have done it, because it's like it's going to be scrutinized by not only the public and all sorts of stuff. So I don't know. And she also says the other psychologist like didn't do her job right and stuff, and then they point out all sorts of stuff that she didn't necessarily do the proper way or said didn't need to be done for some reason, etc. And it's just a big joke. So anyways, I hope there's justice in this case, and you know, Johnny Depp at least gets to do acting roles, whether he wins the case or not. I do think it's shown enough to people that I think there's a lot of people that would hire him again, because there's a lot of doubt now that she is actually telling the truth. And the more you see the evidence, the more it's like, there's just nothing. Like, he's definitely said some mean things or whatever. But it's like there's no evidence to say that he's just beating the crap out of her or anything, you know, no doctor visits, no pictures of her just getting like having all these wounds, swollen faces, arms, you know, bruises on her body, just none. So, and you know, the way she says is like he beat the crap out of her. But then every single person that's ever dated him, been in, you know, sexual relationships with him, etc., are all saying he's like super nice and pleasant. So it just doesn't align with who everybody else says Johnny is, and then randomly, you know, he's not that way. And he's just beating the crap out of somebody who has, you know, there's clear evidence to say that she hits him and beats on him, and you know, has said so on voice recording. It just goes on and on. It's just crazy. And this is the lengths you got to go to, you know, to even somewhat disprove somebody about this. I'd say in the majority of the time you're probably going to lose, though, especially with people like this that just throw you under the bus and act like everything she said is 100% factual, even though there's no evidence or proof to say that it's factual. So, pretty interesting stuff. Anyways, peace out.